Hey, Dr. Jon Finn here. Welcome to the Habit Mechanic podcast. Right now, you can get my new best-selling book, Train Your Brain for the AI Revolution, at tougherminds.co.uk. The digital book, audiobook, and physical book are all available at a special price that you won't find anywhere else.
Welcome to the Habit Mechanic podcast. To help you finish this year strongly and get ready for a successful 2024, we're re-releasing every podcast we've recorded so far that takes a deep dive into the Habit Mechanic book. The episode's coming up in a few moments. Remember, if you want to get your business off to a great start in January, get in touch to discuss how our Habit Mechanic keynotes or workshops can equip your people with practical skills that help them build super habits in 5 minutes. Or if you want to earn £100,000 per year working part-time by launching your own coaching business, we guarantee to help you do that in just 13 hours. Get in touch with us today to learn more about becoming a certified habit mechanic coach who can transform people's lives and is recognized as a world leader in the field. For more details, contact us via the website. The link is in the podcast notes. Or, if you want to feel better and do better every day, download the Habit Mechanic University app from your app store. Enjoy the episode.
Hello, Habit Mechanics. I hope that you're well. We are going to talk about sleep, diet, and exercise. I'm joined today, as ever, by my friend and colleague, Andrew Whitelam. Andrew, how are you doing?
Yeah, hi there, John. Very well, thanks. Good to see you again. And sleep, diet, and exercise is the subject of chapter 19 of the Habit Mechanic book. So we're focusing our attention around that, as you say, initially. And it's a chapter I know catches so many people's attention. It is like many other chapters and so much more of the content in the Habit Mechanic book, very practical and applicable and really accessible. So I know people will benefit massively just from listening to this podcast, and getting themselves a copy of the book as well will be hugely beneficial. So I think it's important just to get through this as thoroughly as we can, because it's so beneficial. And of course we're also rooting this conversation in our stress awareness month because of the interdependency, the interrelation between diet, exercise, and sleep, and optimizing it and reducing stress, which I know you're going to explain to us very shortly. So that's exciting too. So this is very much staying within that framework as well. You start chapter 19 with a story which we'll talk about a bit later on, about a very well-known sporting champion. But you also explain that optimizing your diet, your exercise, and sleep has so many benefits. Things like improving your productivity, your confidence, your leadership even. But then significantly, you also say that it will help you spend less time thinking on helpful thoughts and help you with your stress management. So, John, give us an outline of why. Why is it so profound, the diet, exercise, and sleep for us as humans?
Yeah, because fundamentally it gets our brain working well. So we can link all three back to improving brain function. And if your brain's working well, your limbic systems will be less agitated, so you'll spend less time dwelling, beating yourself up. You'll have more willful control over your behavior that you can use to build and help and build more super habits, more helpful habits, destroy more destructive habits. So it's the foundation. On the timeline of the chapters in the book, it's right at the base of step 3, where we start to show people how they can actually build new helpful habits. And it's at the base for a reason, because if we don't get these 3 things right, everything else is more difficult. So people often, they want to know, how do I do an extra hour of focused high impact work today? That's what I want to focus on. And if we're not sleeping properly or eating properly or exercising properly, our chances of doing that are severely limited. So we've got to get these things right. They are the basics. But like many things for human beings, we think because we know what they are, we've got it covered and we're all good. and I don't need to waste any time paying attention to my sleep, my diet, or my exercise. The challenge is the conditions of the world we live in have changed very quickly. If we just think of, well, let's just start with my own lifespan. I remember the TV going off at a certain time. I remember there being only, I mean, in the evening where there was nothing on air anymore. There were only 4 channels, um, and I don't even know how old Channel 4 is, but maybe even 3 channels when I was first born. Then we now live in a world in that space where we can just stream things 24/7, not just TV. We've got social media. We've got the phone. This idea from when I was growing up, you had to physically go downstairs into the kitchen to pick the phone up to phone someone up, and I wouldn't be phoning someone at 2 o'clock in the morning, whereas I know people are now sending messages at that time in the morning. So the world around us is changing, and if we fast forward to just the last few years, where most people before the pandemic would have left the house every day to go somewhere physically to go to work, that's changed now. So many people are not even leaving the house anymore in a day. That's massively negatively impacting exercise levels. There is such a wide range of factory made food available now, food products that have been deliberately designed to make them highly appealing to the limbic regions of our brain, to our human R8 brain. And I think there was some data a few months ago showing that 50% of the food we consume in the UK is known to be bad for us. It's ultra processed food. So wherever we look in terms of our sleep, our diet, our exercise, they're getting more hard to do. I know that my generation sleep at least 1 hour less per night than my grandparents' generation. So, yeah, than our grandparents' generation. That's like a 1 hour, one night sleep less per week. It's like 1 week's, well, 1 working week's sleep less per month. These are big changes, and they are damaging brain function.
Yeah, you say that in chapter 19 as well. And I think it's clear from what you've said, these are foundational things we need to get right: our diet, exercise, and sleep. And we're going to talk about what we can do in each of those areas in due course. But recently, I think it's really interesting. I saw a YouTube video from Dr. Chris Van Tulleken, who I think some people in the UK might recognize. He has a twin brother. They're both media commentators, reporters, presenters, all of the above, on lifestyle issues, well-being issues, health issues. Chris Van Tulleken is a medical doctor, practicing medical doctor. He's also an associate professor at University College London, and he's published a book called Ultra Processed People. And you just mentioned ultra processed food. Then I think he uses the abbreviation UPF, which is not anything to do with sunscreen. It sounds a bit like it, but it's ultra processed food. And he's in this YouTube video, which I think was recorded at the Royal Institution, the organization in Britain that tries to make science accessible to people and share important insights from science. He was speaking there about ultra processed food, I think to promote his book as well, of course, but warning of the dangers of it. And he talked about it being a cause of cancer, a cause of metabolic disease, and most significantly, John, for our podcast, he talked about it being a cause of mental illness. And in the book, you write in chapter 19 of The Habit Mechanic, you talk about this too, and how it can be injurious for us, about diet and sleep and exercise as well. So how does it damage our brains? What does bad food and by extension sleep and exercise do to our brains?
Yeah, I think it's been quite hard to measure. So let's say that you eat a Mars bar, and it's quite hard to then track that in your body and see how it impacts brain function. but we've got a general sense of what's going on. One is some of this ultra processed food is unrecognizable to our body. Our body doesn't know what it is, so it can't even pass the blood-brain barrier. So we think we don't typically think when we're eating about, is this good for our brain or not? We're thinking about, is this going to make me fatter? Is this going to make me slimmer? Is this going to give me the right energy levels? But actually, we should be thinking, how is this going to impact my brain function? And in chapter 19, we go through the different sources of things our brain needs in order to function really well. But some of the things we're putting into our body can't get past the blood-brain barrier, so it can't contribute nutritionally to the brain, which is problematic. Our brain burns a disproportionate amount of energy for its size in our body. I think it burns something like 40% of our carbohydrates. The stat is in chapter 19 somewhere, if I've got that wrong. But it's disproportionately a lot. So that's one thing. What we can see then in the brain when we've got people that are consuming high intakes of ultra processed foods, including junk food, is that it does people's brains do start to get damaged. And this is a study I talk about in chapter 19, where I think it was a group of middle-aged men who were put on a junk food diet for a week, and just within that week, what they noticed in the brain was that their hippocampi started to shrink. They got smaller. This is problematic because the hippocampi are the only sites in the human brain that we understand producing new brain cells. If you've got a dogs have hippocampi in their noses. So hippocampi are essential for learning. And one of the things they do is they release the seeds of new brain cells into the brain. And what is mental health? What is a mental health challenge? Well, fundamentally, it's about not being able to get your attention onto what is helpful for you, not being able to think thoughts that help you to feel good about yourself. So if we're in a rut of thinking lots of unhelpful things and doing lots of unhelpful things, what we actually need is to develop some new wires in our brain so we can tell ourselves a different story about what's going on, and we can develop some different habits and some different routines. But if we don't have the seeds for the new brain cells, that's not going to happen. So we can see that ultra-processed food, junk food, is damaging the hippocampus, and it's stopping us from being able to, we can know what we need to do to get better, but it's stopping us from being able to practice and habitualize those new ways of thinking and doing. So this is very real, and we've been talking about this for a long time, and in that period of time, the volume of ultra processed food people are consuming has massively increased. So it was a problem when we originally spoke about it. Now it's maybe 10 times worse than it was, and it seems to be getting worse and worse.
Yeah, and I know your analysis of why we are compelled to have and consume these bad foods, and hence the situation is worsening. It is also in the Habit Mechanic book as well, and coincidentally, some of the things Dr. Chris Van Tulliken says as well touches on the much deeper analysis you give. So let's hope that more and more people through different channels are just becoming aware of the dangers of this. So as I say, also in chapter 19 of the Habit Mechanic, you cite a really useful example of a well-known sporting champion who has a way of making changes and changing behavior, or certainly the foundational step to take, which we'll talk about in due course. So keep listening out for that. But let's get into then what we should be doing, what sort of things we should be eating, how to get better sleep, how to improve our exercise levels. In as I say, chapter 19, there's a heading: 4 ways to improve your diet for brain function. You list them as: eat the right energy, remember fatty acids, stop buying junk food, and get plenty of antioxidants. Perhaps we can take each one of those, starting with eat the right energy.
Yeah, so our brain needs carbs. That's the main source of energy it uses. Now, some people will have heard about diets saying don't eat carbs, cut carbs out of your diet, etc. That's dangerous because carbohydrates in us are the glucose is the fuel that runs the brain. But the types of you can get different types of carbohydrates on a continuum. Some are simple, all the way through to complex. So complex are things like brown, red, pasta, rice, but also I can refer to my list here actually because there's also some left field ones that you don't normally think about as being carbohydrates, but sweet potatoes, lentils, peas, that kind of thing, green vegetables. So the key, or one of the four areas of things we need to get right is to make sure that we're getting our complex carbs into our diet, so that we've got that steady flow of energy into our brain. People experience when they eat simple carbs. Let's say they might have some pasta for lunch, that they can then feel like their energy levels crash after half an hour or an hour or so. And that's created because those carbs burn very quickly. So we've got to be consuming complex carbohydrates. That's what we mean by eat the right energy.
Yeah, and just worth saying, I think, as you say, as you referred to, John, there was a few years ago a bit of an outpouring of no carb diets. I think it was one called the Atkins diet, which just involved eating large quantities of red meat. And yeah, it's maybe unpalatable, no pun intended, for some people that they have to eat carbs. But as you say, as you pointed out, these unrefined grains, the complex carbohydrates. Again, you can find more details in the Habit Mechanic book, chapter 19. That's what we mean when we say carbohydrates. And yeah, I must admit, I think you told me that many years ago about the need for glucose and for the brain, and it was really sobering for me, because you just, well, yeah, you didn't know the information, but you just didn't associate that with the brain, because we're kind of conditioned to expect it to be related to, I don't know, endurance exercise and physical performance, that kind of thing. But carbohydrates in the brain, fantastic bit of insight there. Eating the right energy, as you put it. The next point then: remember fatty acids. Talk to us about that, please, John.
Yeah, and I've just found my stats. So although your brain only makes up around 3% of your overall body weight, it uses about 20% of your oxygen and around 25% of your glucose.
Wow.
So it's consuming a disproportionate amount of energy and oxygen. So fatty acids, yeah. So again, there has been a diet movement, maybe less so now, but used to be, and you'll still see food saying low in fat. Fat is essential for us. So our brain, again, we don't think of these things, but our brain isn't made of fairy dust, and it isn't made of Mars bars or cake. It's made of fatty acids. So our brain is changing all the time. Some parts of it are dying, being pruned away. and other parts are growing. So we need building blocks, we need building materials. And the core building materials for the brain are fatty acids. There are two core types of fatty acids. One is omega-6, which you get from things like eggs. The other is omega 3. And typically in our Western diets, we lack the omega-3 fatty acids. We don't have enough of them. So we've got to be mindful to get those into the system. And people are familiar with omega-3 fatty acids in relation to they're in oily fish. They're in cold water fish like salmon, tuna, kiwi fruits, spinach, walnuts, etc. So I'm certainly very mindful that my breakfast is a combination. Well, it's a combination of another one of these as well, but at least 3 days a week I have salmon in a trying to think of how it would be described. Oh yeah, a whole wheat pitta. So I get the complex carbs and the omega-3 fatty acids, and I also squeeze some lemon juice on there, which brings in another one of the areas we're going to talk about. So again, it's one thing knowing this stuff, it's another thing actually getting it into your diet and habitualizing that.
Yeah, and again, I keep saying it, but we're going to come on to that. But I just do think it's so fascinating to drill down into the right things to do. So point 3 then, stop buying junk food. A bit of an obvious one, and you've touched on it. Perhaps we can just move on from that. Studies we've referred to, and in the book you refer to a BBC broadcaster who did a bit of a documentary on himself about the consumption of junk food and the actual damage it did to his brain. So as I say, we have spoken about that just now on the podcast, and so we can leave that perhaps. Unless there's anything you want to add, but let's move on to the final point of the 4. No, sorry, John. Yeah,
there is something I'll add. So we are constantly triggered to buy junk food. I talk about, I think we've discussed it in one of these podcasts, the McDonald's app. I think we discussed it in the last chapter 18 podcast we did about that. When you go to the supermarket, you'll see the ends of the aisles stacked with offers, and often they're junk food. Supermarkets know what we eat, and they know what they make the biggest margins on, and it's often the junk food. And I had when you go to the same supermarket every week, you don't necessarily notice so much the things that change, because the changes are quite subtle. And over the last not the last few years, but a lot before the pandemic, I worked in America quite a lot. And I was working for one client in Denver, and there was a big supermarket called Whole Foods, which is a bit like Waitrose in the UK. It's actually owned by Amazon. And I went into the supermarket and I noticed that so I'd been there a few times before. So this was maybe the 3rd or 4th time I'd been my trip there. So this time I went and I noticed by the tills, the cash points, they had all cakes, muffins, and cupcakes and brownies. I was just got my attention thinking that's new. And I subsequently read, I think the day afterwards in the New York Times or something, that Whole Foods had doubled the amount of money they were making on those products just by simply putting them by the tills. So we are being manipulated all the time to buy this stuff. When you go to the cafe, I can think Cafe Nero I go to, Brett, what do you see in the counter? It's the cakes, it's the muffins. They're there deliberately because they're trying to catch you when your willpower's a little bit low, and you just give in and say, "Oh yeah, I'll have one of those, thanks." So we just got to be really conscious of that. And if you're in the habit of having your double chocolate chip muffin, then you can create a D.E.S swap to help you to work on that habit and replace it with something else. So I have a sweet tooth and I do like chocolate. So now I just I eat a lot of 90% dark chocolate, and I'll just literally have a square of that Lindt, do a nice one, and one square of that is 50 calories, and there's maybe a tiny bit of sugar in it, and I find that as satisfying as I would having a bigger chocolate bar or something. So it's often about it's easier to replace something than to stop something. So you've got to think of that. How do I replace this? And then eventually, once you've sort of weaned yourself off the sugar, it's easier to stop and do something else. But yeah, so that's a little stop buying junk food story, an exclusive for the Habit Mechanic podcast.
Yeah, great stuff. And Lint, if you're listening, you know where to send the 90% chocolate. But no, it is interesting, John, that for you to share your personal experience. Yeah, so well, thank you for that. Let's go then on to the final fourth point about antioxidants and their ability to tackle the problem of free radicals.
Yeah, so we're in the bigger theme of stress this month, Stress Awareness Month. I think it's quite helpful to think about stress as a physical impact on your brain, like you get a whack on the head or something. It's doing that, it's working the brain harder, the brain's whirling round. That whirling round and overuse causes inflammation, like when you get a physical injury. The chemicals that get released in the stress response, cortisol, etc., they stack up. They again cause inflammation and damage. That goes back to what we were speaking about with the hippocampi becoming shrunk and damaged. So we need to put into our body nutrition that we know is good at countering um, the damage that we get in our bodies, and we get these free radicals being produced essentially, and we know they can damage brain function. So it's important that we get the antioxidants into our body, which you can get from things like oranges, citrus fruits. I talked about squeezing a lemon onto my salmon in the morning, but also red peppers, almonds, spinach, sweet potatoes, broccoli. Also, the editor must have taken this out of my book because maybe they didn't know what it was. But no, it's just nice it's not in the book, which is lipoic acids. The lipoic acids are what you get from offally meat. So they're a good source of antioxidants. Offally meat coming back into fashion. But yeah, so get plenty of antioxidants.
Yeah, and I think spinach and sweet potatoes appear in the complex carbs heading as well. So sounds like they're two superfoods for your brain. If we just judge by what we've just had a run through. So yeah, fantastic. That's really great. And it's just great to hear what we can eat to improve our brain function, and of course support us in building helpful new habits, or super habits as you would call them. And yeah, if you want to read more, you can in chapter 19, of course, of the Habit Mechanic. Let's move on to exercise then, John. Obviously, diet, exercise, and sleep. You talked about a D.E.S swap, diet, exercise, and sleep, or D.E.S as you refer to it in the Habit Mechanic. Why is exercise important for our brain function and our ability to build super habits and combat stress?
Yeah, fundamentally because we're designed to move around. We're designed to walk about 12 miles a day. We are hunter-gatherers. So when we move, it activates our brain in a helpful, positive way. So we're designed to move around and solve problems or learning, in other words. So when we move around, we get a protein in our brain release called BDNF. So it helps our brain to function well. Typically, we overeat now. We consume too many calories, so exercise is important as well to burn off those calories, to burn off the excess of energy that otherwise resides in our body and causes health issues. Exercise also is helpful for getting a good night's sleep. So if we don't exercise, sleep will be harder. But again, we've seen a huge increase in sedentary behaviour, and not just since the pandemic, actually a long time before the pandemic. One of our colleagues, Professor Jim McKenna, this is one of his areas of expertise, helping organisations, government to get people more active using behavioural science. But the part of the fallout from the pandemic, I think, is people are just moving around less because they are they don't need to leave the house. And I hear some people making a virtue of that because they don't understand actually how important physical activity is. So yeah, exercise first and foremost. Think about walking. Your body is designed to walk about 12 miles a day. It doesn't mean you need to walk 12 miles a day. It just means recognize what you're actually designed to do. I actually try to walk about 10 miles, run and walk about 10 miles a day in the working week. So I'm aiming for a 60-mile average per week. Last week I got 64 miles, so I had a good week. I'm running probably between 15 to 20 miles a week, and the rest is walking. So I'm very deliberately walking, get myself out, get out in the morning for a run, get out mid-morning for another walk, try to get out after lunch for another walk, and then I do a longer walk in the evening. So, and I notice the huge difference when I don't do that. I don't sleep as well. I feel more stressed. I don't think as clearly. I get loads of great insights about things I'm working on whilst I'm walking and running. So it's so key, but we're doing less of it. And it's not just about walking. We've got to make sure that we're working our muscles out as well. Again, not necessarily going to the gym, but mowing the lawn, doing some gardening, just doing some sit-ups and some press-ups and building the routine around that. That's something I've done over the years as well. So I try to do. I've hurt my shoulder the last few weeks, so I haven't been doing this. But I try. I do about as a minimal 50 push-ups, 50 sit-ups per day, and when I'm on it, I'm aiming to do 1,000 repetitions per week. So just setting yourself these little challenges, these little goals. Just start with one press up, one sit up. It's so key. So yeah, it's real. We need to do it, and it's ultimately about habits.
Yeah, again, please stay with us. It's coming. We're going to talk about how you can start to change your behavior in terms of your diet and exercise and sleep. And of course, you can see all of this in the Habit Mechanic book, chapter 19 and beyond. But in chapter 19, it's something you do so fascinatingly. It's just a detail almost, just a microcosm of things. But I just like to do it. I'm going to read them out so you don't have to, John, because I know you do most of the talking on these sessions. But you talk about how different types of activity and exercise help the brain in different ways. And I think it's helpful for people to know that, because it gives them a gateway to start changing the behavior. And of course, as you say, knowledge and skills is a component of behavior change. So in the Habit Mechanic book, you say lifting weights and strength training is connected to complex thinking, reasoning, and problem solving. Aerobic exercise is thought to boost the memory. HIIT training, or high intensity interval training, as people call it, helps us regulate cravings and addictions and appetite, which we've just been discussing. Yoga, which is something a lot of people do, connected to strengthening brain circuits and emotional regulation. And exercising outdoors in the daytime, which of course you've just talked about, and cited your personal example, which has been very helpful. Improve our mood, because light helps brain chemistry. So you list those points there, which are really, really useful. And I think it's worth pointing out, perhaps you could just do that for us. All that is supported by scientific insight and research.
Yeah, so since we're able to actually look at brains in real time, it's easier to measure the impact of these types of things. But we just know fundamentally that moving around is good for us. It is good for us. That's another thing, actually, I would say definitely I see. So high intensity interval training helps regulate cravings, addictions, appetite. I definitely notice if I go for a run, I'm not as hungry. I don't feel like, which sounds counterintuitive, right? But I don't need to eat as much, because we are fundamentally designed to work in that way. You know, our world's changed a lot. We are designed to be moving around. We've only been societally farming for about 12,000 years, which is a long period of time, right? But not in the span of how long we've been around as a species. We've been around for over 300,000 years. That's just a little slice of that. So we're designed to be moving around. And if you went to London, for example, 100 years ago, people on average were walking about 10 miles a day. And not everybody, because you had to walk to get around. Now, we don't have to. And because of technology, we don't even have to leave the house. We can just get everything delivered to us. So yeah, this is just so essential, but you don't need to know the science necessarily. You just need to put it into practice, and it will make you feel better. It will help you to feel better, and get that brain working well.
In the book, in chapter 19, you talk about improving exercise levels, etc., and various other issues around that. We'll move on to sleep shortly, but there's just one thing you say in the area of exercise, which I think is really fascinating and important. You talk about the rise of the use of exercise trackers and smart watches and all these devices which tell you how far you've done and run, etc., which are useful, but you warn people to be aware of what you call a licensing effect. You know, I've done and I'll paraphrase, not something you say in the book, but something I kind of thought of. Oh, I've done a massive gym session. I'm going to have a protein shake and 10 chicken breasts now because I've earned it.
Yeah. So people. So if we go back to the base idea of intelligent self-watching, that is the key to making change. And the trackers give us a way to intelligently self-watch calorie output, but they don't give us a way to intelligently self-watch calorie input. So what the licensing effect is saying is that people are underestimating the calorie content of some of the foods that they're consuming, or they're giving themselves permission to consume because they think they've burned loads of energy. So people are maybe walking into work a few miles, and that means they burn 300 calories. But then to treat themselves when they get there, they're having a double chocolate chip muffin, which is like 700 calories and twice the sugar intake that you're allowed for the day. So we've got to be careful and monitor that, and that's one thing that I've found really powerful. Actually, I've been using a new app in the last few months, which I found really good. It's called NutriCheck, It's just where you add your calories in, and just makes you aware. You educate yourself first of all about um, the calorific content of different foods that you're eating, the different and on the composition of those foods. Like one of the things I've noticed is just how much I'm always over on salt intake, for example, and I don't add salt to anything, and I eat pretty healthily. Um, that surprised me, and it's always like 50% over, even when I'm trying. So that I exercise a lot as well, so I maybe counter some of that stuff because I sweat a lot. But yeah, I always find those things really educational. But if we're gonna intelligently self-watch calorific output, then we need to intelligently self-watch calorific input, um, and that's going to help us when we step on maybe the ultimate intelligent self-watching machine, the weighing scale. It's going to help us to get that needle pointing, all those numbers landing where we want them to land.
Yeah, well, that's a salutary lesson and a sobering thought as well. So I think that's a really great inclusion in the Habit Mechanic book. And just a brief digression from me. It's a different story, perhaps for a different podcast. But a friend of mine has developed a career as personal training, and some people ask him. When he might do some strength work with them, do I need to up my protein now? And he does know, he doesn't have anything like your insight, but just say, nope, we don't, because people assume they need to eat more. So yeah, it's so fascinating. Read more in the Habit Mechanic. Let's move on to sleep then. Finally, and in the book you write that if you want to improve mental health, well-being, performance, leadership in work and life, and by extension help reduce your stress, start by improving your sleep.
Yeah, and just as I open that page, I see a quote from Dr. Matthew Walker, who's the author of Why We Sleep, which is a deep dive. Matthew Walker is not an expert on how to help you to get more sleep. He's an expert on measuring the impact of sleep on brain function. So, as fascinating as a reader's Why We Sleep is, it doesn't give you what's in our book, and certainly what's in chapter 19 about how to actually improve this. But I use a quote from him in here, which is, he says, "We are socially, organizationally, economically, physically, behaviorally, nutritionally, linguistically, cognitively, and emotionally dependent on sleep." In other words, sleep impacts everything that we think and do every moment of our waking lives. And also by default of our sleeping lives, because if you're not sleeping well, there'll be some negative impact on the quality of your sleep as well. It becomes like a big vicious cycle. So why is it important? There's a few different theories, and our understanding is changing all the time. One of the insights is that, well, sleep has two core functions. One is a recharge and a sort of detox type function, and the other one is a learning function. So one of the theories about the detox function of sleep is that the brain doesn't have a lymphatic system sort of drain away the rubbish that builds up in it. So it has to shut down in order to do that detox cleansing kind of process. So when we're sleeping, we're getting rid of lots of the unhelpful stuff that build up in our brain, and we're seeing some um, well, increasing amounts of data showing correlations and increasingly causal relationships between poor sleep and prefrontal cortex diseases like dementia, for example. So that's real. And it's about when you don't sleep well, you don't clear out that junk that builds up in your brain during the day. And one of the core things we're talking about in Stress Awareness Month is that we're getting more and more of that junk building up because we're getting more and more stressors, and our if we're not, and if you're stressed, you don't sleep well. If you don't sleep well, you get more stressed. It becomes a big negative cycle. And so that's one function of sleep. The other function is learning. Again, we think of learning. Oh, if I was doing some exams, then that would be great, wouldn't it? Because I could improve how I was revising. But we're learning all the time. So when you sleep, one of the things your brain is doing, and this is connected to dreaming, is your brain is making sense and it's processing all the information that you've paid attention to that day, all the salient information. And you can think of, I often think about this now just as a metaphor, like the volume of emails that I get. I sometimes think, imagine if someone just walked into my office at the end of the day and put all that down as physical mail. It's just it's not manageable. It's impossible to manage. But I think we can use the same metaphor with the volume of information we're being exposed to. We're just being bombarded by information in a way that our brain is simply not designed to deal with. We're designed to live in little villages, in small little communities where we have a limited number of social connections and a limited number of information points coming our way. Now we live in a globally connected world where we're just being inundated with information, and that information, or the people who are running the information channels are getting slicker and slicker at addicting us to go into those channels. So one of the functions of sleep is the learning function. We're making sense of all the stuff that's gone on, and you make sense of some of the stresses that have happened to you that day, some of the disconnections that you're seeing. But often what's happening is, and I think this is the biggest cause of people not sleeping well, is that by the time your head hits the pillow, you haven't. For me, the way I've best seen people deal with stress is they apply. It's almost like a factory. I've never used this metaphor before, but let's see how it goes. You can kind of see those factories where, let's just say that there is it's a potato factory, and these potatoes come out of the field. They've been picked by the clever tractor, and they go into the factory. The first thing that happens is we wash the potato. We wash the mud off the potato, and there'll be a machine that does that, rumbles it all around, gets it all clean. And then there'll be another part of the factory that peels the potatoes, and then maybe another thing that slices it. But if we think of our experiences in the daytime through that potato metaphor, if we go to bed and the potatoes are still dirty and they're still caked in mud and soil, then our brain just does not have the capacity to process them when we're sleeping. So how do we get the soil and mud off? We need to do our focused reflection. We need to do our focused breathing. We need to use our stress management techniques. And then if we've got some of that mud and that dirt off and we've cleaned them up a little bit because we've done some deliberate reflection using the tools that we unpack in Destroy Your Stress in 5 Minutes course, and also some of those tools are in chapter 22 of the Habit Mechanic, also in the stress coach in the app as well. If we've done that sort of preparation work.
Preparatory work. I couldn't say it. Preparatory work. Yeah.
Then when our head hits the pillow, our sleep brain can take over, and then it can sort of essentially tell a different. It helps us to wire in a different story about our experience as we sleep, and that's what dreams are. So when we're sleeping, we're not just learning about how to do long division, or how to use the new AI bot that's associated with the software that we use, or how to solve a problem we're trying to solve at work, we are also learning how to how to deal with what's going on in our lives. But we're also learning how to build better habits. If you're trying to build a better habit, you need sleep in order to accelerate your learning. We've seen that very clearly in studies. So I always remember a big study when I was studying sports psychology, um, which was about basketball free throws, which is like a penalty, the equivalent of a penalty in soccer, although there's no one trying to stop, there's no goalkeeper if you like, but it's a set piece play.
Like a free shot at the hoop, isn't it? From I'm not a big
Free,
basketball
yeah,
aficionado, but yeah.
a free shot at the hoop, and they were just looking at how do we speed up the learning of this skill in people, and they had different groups in different conditions. The condition that won, that made the biggest improvement, the main effect variable was more sleep. They slept more. And you actually see that now in some professional sports teams. So in there, a bit more in the European culture, but it has come here as well. I think like Man City have this infrastructure. You know, the players go for a nap at lunchtime, and part of that is to rehabilitate them physically, but also mentally. It speeds up their learning. But yeah, anyway, I go into more detail that in the book, but sleep has two core functions: clearing out the rubbish that builds up, and also learning.
Yeah, and of course, you've highlighted how they can contribute to so many important things. One of which is, of course, managing our stress. In the habit mechanic, John, in the chapter, you list 18 ways to improve your sleep. Not going to go through all of them, of course, but just a couple, just to pick out briefly here while we're talking. Which I think people will be interested in. And it's the first one, and it's it's the one that has the most text under it, I think, in terms of, or certainly close to it in terms of the list. Develop consistent sleep patterns. That's important, isn't it?
Yeah, we run on habit, and actually, consistency is a counterintuitive thing, because if you're inconsistent, you're still consistent. You're consistently inconsistent. Um, I see this. Got moving away from sleep, going back to my sports psychology stuff, where I created this tool called the pre-shot training system. It's about helping people to build better pre-shot routines. And people would say, "Well, I don't have a routine." And let's say that's in golf, and you say, "Well, you do, because you walk up to the golf ball, you set up, and you hit the ball, right? That's a routine." Oh yeah, I never thought of it like that before. So we are very consistent. We just have low self-awareness, but we need to build helpful consistency. Um, so yeah, it's back to the habit idea, and you can be consistent. Your consistency might look different on different parts of the week. So my working week consistency or routines for sleep are different to the weekend. And I found a really helpful way to think about sleep as it's not about how much you get per night. Think about how much you get per week, because that takes the pressure off having a great night's sleep on any given night. And now, for many of us, because we work very flexibly, we can even top up with things like power naps during the day. And that's something that I use myself. Um, just 15-20 minutes, get into bed like you would at night time, close your eyes, I set the alarm, I don't fall into a deep sleep, and that's the purpose of just 15-20 minutes. But I've tried and tested lots of different things. For me, that is the optimal way. If I want to recharge, I'm not going to get anything better. I'm not going to get any more recharge done in 15-20 minutes than by closing my eyes, and laying down. So, if you have a bad night's sleep, you can maybe top up with a power nap. But Same at the weekend, you can kind of top up a little bit, maybe sleep a little bit longer at the weekend. So a bit like I'm thinking about, I said before about I'm trying to get 60 miles of exercise done per week, running and walking. Then you could think about the same thing with your sleep. How many hours of sleep do you need to get? The the optimal length of sleep for you will be different, and it varies. Sometimes you feel like you need a bit more in the winter because there's less sunlight. Some periods of your life are more intense, so you need more sleep. Um, so yeah, you've got to work out what's the optimal number for you, and then um, just work towards that. I'd say set a weekly goal and then break that down.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Just pick out one more of these 18 ways to improve sleep, which you listed in chapter 19 of the Habit Mechanic. Just one thing that really struck with me, and it's just a brief insight, which does not do any justice whatsoever to the depth and quality of the insights in the chapter as a whole about improving diet, exercise, and sleep. But this one, the point is take care with caffeine, and you cite that there's some data which shows there's a time for stopping your caffeine intake, which is a lot longer than I think some people will think it is.
Yeah. I personally, I am only drinking 3 caffeinated drinks per day. I'm stopping drinking caffeine by 4 p.m. in the afternoon, and I'm typically in bed then 9:30ish. Um, do I assign a length to that? Sorry, Andrew, you saying?
Yes, I think in the book we cite 6 hours,
Yeah, it stays in your system for six
which
hours a day.
I know when you share that, as I say, it's just a brief insight. It doesn't do any kind of justice to the depth of insight that in the whole chapter about diet, exercise, and sleep. But just that alone, 6 hours. People might think, oh, just a couple of hours, or if I'm out for a bit of an early evening meal or something, I'll have a coffee afterwards. But 6 hours, goodness me.
Yeah, people say, people sometimes say, well, I only have decaf, after 7 o'clock or whatever. But there's still caffeine in decaffeinated drinks, just less caffeine. So yeah, it's people don't understand these things, and getting a good night's sleep is a complex web. For me, at the heart of that web is stress. But that's why I list down these 18 ideas in the book. And I've tried and tested all these ideas. Um, I mentioned habit mechanic, stress management, confidence building tools, which we unpack in chapters 21, 22, 23. But yeah, just got to try and test things out, and I've certainly benefited. I have better quality sleep now than I have done at any other time in my life, and I really prioritize my sleep. And it has a huge positive impact on my life. And it takes us back to the brain states idea, the 25-hour brain. You've got to get that base level right, the recharge zones, and sleep, diet, and exercise are fundamental to that. And I'd say of the three, sleep is the most important, because if you don't sleep well, you're less inclined to exercise properly. You're more inclined to eat junk food, and then you'll be less likely to sleep well the night after because you'll be staying up late again, and you just start to build a bad habit. So for me, sleep is the most important. It is the foundation. I just want to thank Gary, who posted a comment just about just saying, I fully agree that activity can reduce appetite and make sense for you to remind us that is how we are made, especially when the activity is a bit hard. And this is the thing, we don't do things that are difficult, so that's why we resist doing them, because we want to save energy. So the key is to make these things easier. So you don't have to do 60 miles a week to start with. Just start with, well, you don't ever have to do 60 miles a week if you don't want to. Just start with an extra 5 minutes. Start with one push-up. Start with one extra portion of fruit and veg. Start with 5 minutes more sleep tonight than last night. That's the type of thing we need to work towards.
Yeah, and what we've done on this session, I think, John, is take people through in a really useful way: diet, exercise, and sleep. And of course, they can read much more in the Habit Mechanic. But that's been great. Now, we promised we would talk about how we can start to make positive, helpful changes in all these areas, and we're going to do that now. Of course, no replacement for the book, but at the start of the chapter, you talk about a world champion tennis player, specifically Novak Djokovic, who the example you cite doesn't specifically relate to improving diet, exercise, and sleep, although, as I understand it, Novak Djokovic pays great attention to certainly diet and no doubt sleep too, being a world-class athlete. But you talked about a D.E.S swap, and Novak Djokovic unknowingly has used part of that process, self-watching. Please tell the story and explain more.
Yeah, a friend of mine, a guy called Simon Briggs, is the tennis correspondent for the Daily Telegraph, a British broadsheet newspaper. So he, from time to time, gets to interview these world champion athletes. And he was just telling me that Djokovic was explaining how he monitored himself, how he monitored what he was doing and what he was thinking and his energy levels. And Simon Briggs put it to him, so it's like you've got this, almost like this CCTV camera on your shoulder watching what you're doing. He's like, yeah, that's it, that's what I'm doing. I'm watching myself in that way. And
you use the metaphor of a CCTV camera in the Habit Mechanic and in your work prior to that as well.
Yeah, so that's why it was interesting that Simon had been speaking to him and he was talking in that way, and that's how we described it for a long time. So it's just a good example of someone that is, I think now he's the greatest tennis player of all time. He's using these processes and these techniques. So to package that into, well, how do we use that insight to help us to build better sleep, diet, and exercise habits? Well, the first thing we need to do is do intelligent self-watching. And I'm not going to go too deep into it in this podcast, but we have a tool called the Diet, Exercise, and Sleep Swap Plan. A swap stands for self-watch, make an aim, and make a plan. So this is an intelligent self-watching and planning tool that allows us to monitor our sleep, our diet, our exercise, and plan to make improvements. So we unpack this in chapter 19 of the Habit Mechanic book and show you how to create your own D.E.S swaps on a daily basis. There's also a digital version of that tool in the Habit Mechanic app, university app, which is really powerful. And once you've created a D.E.S swap, you can then package it into a habit building plan. So literally within 5 minutes, you can create a habit building plan. In other words, deliberately activate behavioral science that's going to make it easy for you to automate this new sleep, diet, or exercise habit that you want to practice. And we actually introduce the habit building plan in chapter 20 of the Habit Mechanic. And we give an example of a sleep habit building plan example in there. So for those people that want to take the insights we've shared today and actually put them into practice, I'd recommend just having a go at the D.E.S swap, and you can do that in the book. This is a daily tool, really, really powerful. It's unique. I've never seen anything like it. Also, it's in the app. But remember, creating the D.E.S swap is one thing. To really supercharge your chances of success in changing your behavior, you need to create a habit building plan as well. And you can do that in chapter 20 of the book, and also in the app.
Yeah, it's all there for people, as you say, John. Just briefly, if we, yeah, the D.E.S swap, as you've spoken about, and if we can just spend a few more moments just on self-watching, essentially, as many people will know now, having perhaps read The Habit Mechanic and follow these podcasts, self-watching, you ask people often to rate themselves on a scale from poor to perfect, or 1 to 10. That's the essence of the process, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's moving ourselves away from dichotomizing our behavior as either great or rubbish. So we have this thing called the P2 scale, the poor to perfect scale, where we can label our behavior in a more intelligent way. Very similar to what we do with the T plan, where we rate ourselves out of 10. Similar to how we think about ourselves in the habit metric tools. So yeah, that's the starting point, and that's just helps us to be more intelligent in how we think about our sleep and our diet and our exercise.
Yeah, and it's the start point, as you say, for building those helpful habits in the area of our diet, our exercise, and our sleep. Well, John, we're coming to a close of this session. It's been so fascinating. I know you've worked with tens of thousands of people, and I think it's fair to say consistently diet, exercise, and sleep have been so important in your work with all of them. You must have seen a lot of positive results, a lot of positive benefits from so many people in your time.
Yeah, massive. And there's been a couple of noticeable ones just this year where I've seen people. There's a guy who's training to become a certified habit mechanic coach, and he signed up to the program about this time last year, actually, probably. Yeah, slightly later, but towards the end of last year, knowing that he wasn't going to start the program until the summer. So I hadn't seen him since, from December to the first time I then saw him again was in, I think, June. And literally when he came on the camera, I didn't recognise him. I was literally thinking, is this the same guy that I was speaking to previously? And literally as if he was reading my mind, he said, you might not recognise me, John, because I've lost, I can't remember how much he lost, but he lost a lot of weight. And I said, how have you done that? He said, I've just been using the D.E.S swap. So that speaks to how powerful these tools are. Just of his own accord, he'd just been using the D.E.S swap. So he'd been coaching himself, being a habit mechanic. And then another, actually, someone who's a certified habit mechanic coach, he's talked about he's lost a lot of weight and improved his sleep and his diet and exercise habits, again, by using the D.E.S swap tool. So yeah, I've seen it over a long period of time. We have young people in school using these tools on a daily basis. So the tools are there. It's just about putting them into practice and you get the results.
Yeah, well, fantastic, and a fantastic opportunity for people to improve something which is so important to them. Well, John, thanks for your time once again. Absolutely fascinating and illuminating and beneficial for us all to talk through chapter 19 of The Habit Mechanic. Really enjoyed it, and yeah, I'm going to revisit the chapter myself, I think, and just go through some of those amazing insights. Anything you want to say to bring us to a close?
Just thank you to everyone for listening, and remember, you're only ever one habit away. Thank you to everyone for joining us, and bye for now.
Thanks for listening. Remember, if you want to get your business off to a great start in January, get in touch to discuss how our Habit Mechanic keynotes or workshops can equip your people with practical skills that help them build super habits in 5 minutes. Or if you want to earn $100,000 a year working part-time by launching your own coaching business, we guarantee to help you do that in just 13 hours. Get in touch with us today to learn more about becoming a certified habit mechanic coach who can transform people's lives and is recognised as a world leader in the field. For more details, contact us via the website. The link is in the podcast notes. Or if you want to feel better and do better every day, download the Habit Mechanic University app from your app store. Thanks again for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Habit Mechanic podcast. If you liked it, please subscribe and tell someone else about one of the ideas or insights that you found most interesting.